Well, welcome back to Allison Customs Project Car TV. What we're looking at here is a 2001 Dodge Dakota Sport. It's got the V8, I can't remember, 4 point something V8, 4-speed automatic. This is my brother's truck. It's been my niece's daily driver till she went off to college. It has a whopping 49,000 miles on it, and it's a very clean truck. It has obviously been to a high school parking lot for a period of time in its life. It's got some door dings, some scuff marks on some of the fender flares, but overall it is in excellent shape. The inside is spotless, and my brother has now taken it back as his new, not really daily driver. He's got a vehicle for that. This is going to be his weekend cruiser. Hopefully once in a while go hit an autocross event in a parking lot somewhere. That kind of thing. Something for him to play with, put some money in, because, hey, you know, we all want to sink money into our hobbies. And overall, just really kind of get some fun out of a vehicle. It's been a long time since he's had a vehicle where he was able to do that. He used to be into Jeeps and other 4x4s, and currently lives in Houston, where that's really not really the thing he wants to be out doing. They don't have the mountains that we had here in New Mexico where he used to do that stuff, so he's kind of missing out on that part of it. He's decided this is going to be the vehicle that he plays with, and he's got very little money in it, especially for as much use as they've gotten out of it. So in his mind, he's kind of, hey, I can afford to play with this because it doesn't need to be his daily driver. So why I've got it sitting out here is I just thought we'd do a little walk around, take a look at it, see what kind of condition it is. It runs great. Starts and drives easy. Like I said, he's done a few modifications already. He's converted the stock transmission from a 4-speed to a 5-speed, and it's like super simple, like changing out a transmission controller and like cutting one wire or something. I don't remember the exact instructions, but he did not have to go into the transmission in any way. The transmission was already a 5-speed, as I understand it, and all it needed was a different controller to tell it to start shifting gear, you know, to shift the extra gear. There's a few other things he's done, some of it just regular upkeep. You know, the vehicle is essentially 23 years old, and, you know, he's had to replace some bushings and a steering rack and a few other things. But it's been sitting here for a week, not a drop of oil coming out of it. We're going to do a walk around, and then we're going to talk about what he wants to do with it. All right, so here we are with the 2001 Dodge Dakota, and you can see got some parking lot rash here. Looking down the side of the truck, you can see it's very straight. Good clean truck. All the way around to the front. The only other damage we have is a crack in the grill here. So we're looking at probably repairing or replacing. Actually, the grill is very inexpensive on this truck. And then on the interior, like I said, it's super clean. This truck has had very little use, and it's been taken very good care of. So there you have it. That's the truck walk around, and the inside, super clean truck. So what he wants to do with the truck is get a little lower, and the kits that were available have left the market. He did find one used. The owner was unwilling to ship it. They wanted him to come get it, and it was like 2,000 miles one way, so that he could then pay him, I don't know, $1,500–1,800 more than the kit sold for new. Isn't that how it goes, though? So what are we going to do? We're trying to figure out options to lower it and to make it handle better and to ride a little smoother. It's fairly stiff riding truck. It rides like kind of like a half-ton pickup in a smaller package. The wheelbase doesn't help that a lot, but we're going to try and improve as much of that as we can. The initial goal is to get it lower and install coilovers on the front. That means getting rid of the factory spring buckets and the roughly 5-inch diameter spring, and putting spaces in there and some mounts for coilover shock. So that's really pretty straightforward. The process is going to be, you know, quite a bit of metal work. The rear is currently leaf spring, and I've had it up on a lift already and looked underneath there, which I'll show you later, but there's no room to do like a triangulated 4-link, which would be the ideal, most compact setup. And I say there's no room using the stock fuel tank. Now, if we're willing to go to a fuel cell, and he has said that he would consider it, one of the big things is he doesn't want to have a bed or a filler port in the bottom of the bed or something janky. It's got to either go to the factory fuel filler, or we'd have to figure out something else. And the truck is, like I said, really clean. We really don't want to be doing a whole lot of paint correction or having to repaint a bedside because we tried to move a fuel filler door. We are going to fix probably the wheel arch and that grill, but those are pretty simple. The arch, there's nothing wrong with it other than the paint has been skinned off of it. So that's just a matter of sanding it and repainting. The grill, we're probably going to replace it and just get a white grill or paint it white and go on from there. So as that process, we're going to put coilovers on the front. We are probably going to 3-link the rear, parallel bars for the lower links, some kind of upper link bar, maybe triangulated, maybe not, and then use a Watts link to keep the axle centered. The nice thing is, you go looking, the Dodge Durangos and the Chrysler Aspen, I believe, had a Watts link with the 9 1/4 rear axle. So we can use the rear cover from that using a Mopar part. We can potentially use the links, although in the pictures they look fairly short, so that may or may not work out for us. We may end up making our own links, but it's going to be kind of cool that we can use some factory Mopar parts to get us down the road on this. As I was doing the walk around, some of you who are eagle-eyed might have spotted this tire, and this is a 315/35/20. So we're going to try and get quite a bit of tire under the rear, and we want it all contained in the rear. This should fit. There is quite a bit of room under there, but we're going to be checking that too. Do we need to make any special modifications? And are we going to be able to buy wheels without having to go to some crazy offset or backspacing that makes them really expensive? If we can keep it on a stock width axle with a off-the-shelf wheel, we are way better off price-wise. So in addition, we want to swap out the front tire size to a larger tire. We're going to go to a 275/45/20. I don't have one of those here. He was able to find this locally just as a used tire, and they gave it to him to get it out of their pile that they were going to have to pay to destroy. So I'm going to try and find the same thing just so we can measure it, make sure that will work. And then the goal being that we find matching front and rear wheels that are off-the-shelf sizes that will work for both of these. So that's our goal. We'll see if that works out in our favor or what we end up doing. What you're going to see next is I'm going to get a bunch of measurements, find the center of the wheels, center of the spindles and all that, get some tape on here and mark it. I started trying to do that earlier. One, I realized I should be videoing this, and two, he keeps such a nice wax job on this truck, the tape didn't want to stick, so I'm going to have to get some bug and wax remover and clean the flares a little bit so that I can stick tape to it so that I can mark it for the center of the tires and wheels. We'll get that marked, especially on the front. The rear, I will mark them. It's less important there because most of this work is going to be done with the bed off, and with the bed off, we're not going to be able to see those markings. So we'll be remarking the same center axle line on the frame when we get to that point with the bed off. But the other thing we want to do is get a weight on this vehicle and see where, are we 60% up front, 70% up front, what are we at, and will we be able to adjust any of that by moving components around a little bit. Especially if we move the fuel tank, we might be able to put it behind the axle where the factory spare tire would have been, transferring some of that weight to the back of the truck and helping the offset. Because right now, it's right behind the driver's seat under the bed, which is why it's in the way of trying to do a 4-link, a triangulated type 4-link. So there are some challenges with this truck that we're going to be looking to overcome. And let's get into it. Let's start figuring out what we're going to do to make this truck work. One of the first things I want to do is just mark where the center of the wheel is, and I need to straighten the wheel out a little bit. And what I'm using is just a regular plumb bob. Buy these at any hardware store. I'll see if I can't find them on Amazon, leave you a link. And then a magnet. And I wrapped the magnet in tape just so I don't risk scratch and paint on somebody's car. We're just going to lower this down. Let me straighten that wheel. The goal here is to get your string lined up with the center of the wheel. And with tape, or, well, you're going to want tape on here before you're marking, unless you were, I don't know, going to be painting the whole vehicle later. But the nice thing is when you're not on the slick surface, it kind of makes just a little bit of friction here, so we can get that string lined up with the center of the wheel. Later, when we're measuring, we can come back to that same mark and make sure everything is still where we wanted it. But it's always good information to have if for some reason you needed to go back to it. Versus back here on the rear end, it's going to be critical to know where that center line of that axle needs to be so that we keep this spacing front and rear to looking factory. And or even correcting it if the lineup isn't great on a factory vehicle. That's how we would know where it was. So we're going to mark it on the bed. Even though we're going to be removing the bed, before we actually take the axle loose from anything, we will remark the center on the frame so that we have that information in multiple locations. The other thing that'll help is to also know your wheelbase. So once we get these measurements, we'll also mark them on the floor here and pull a tape measure and get that measurement and write it down. Now that's not super hard to find. You can find that information online. But we have the truck here. We can verify everything is what the internet says it is. Then we're able to duplicate those numbers if we need to. Let me get these things marked, and then we'll kind of get to the next step of what we want to get today. All right, so we're just trying to find the center line of that wheel. I think we're there. And you can do things like use a square. And so let me first mark this string. And I'm just marking both sides of the string, then I can move it and draw a straight line where the string was. And with that plumb bob, as stationary as possible, now we can mark the floor. And then additionally what we're going to do is we're going to measure from the gap in the door to here, or sometimes it's easier to come off the front, but pick some location that you can measure from and come up and then put a piece of tape where that is so that you know to put your tape measure in the same spot each time. So in this case I'm using a fabric tape for measuring cloth. You know, if your wife does sewing or something, that's a great place to steal one, but don't tell her I said that. That set, I might have put that too low. And I'm just going from the end of the tape straight over, and it's about 17 11/16. I have two of these. I have a blue one and a white one. So mark which one you use, because you want to use the same tape measure to get that measurement, because there's a good chance that when you measure this against, say, this square, actually this one is dead on. 17 there. This one actually measures correct. A lot of them don't. They'll be off just a little bit because of the way they crimp the ends and stuff. So it's always good to just use the same tape measure for all your measurements when you're doing this type of stuff. I think we're set there. We'll get the back marked. We'll measure our wheelbase. That gets us to the next step. I'll do the other side off camera, but one of the next things I want to do is get a measurement from the bottom of this flare. For this, we're going to use a metal ruler point rather than trying to stretch this tape or using a regular metal tape measure and trying to hold it straight. And what I found that is usually the easiest is to put your ruler or whatever up there and then at a specific point, I'm just going to mark the top of the ruler here, and this is 36 inches exactly. You can put a line and then measure to that line or whatever. And this is the yellow yardstick, and that's where that's at. And then when we come back to the front, I'm measuring on the front, it's a little bit lower. But again, we just find a point where it makes sense to measure at. We want to be roughly where the center of the tire is. So here is 33 and a half. We can mark that 33 and a half. It's a good measuring spot, and this is the yellow yardstick again. And that's because I have yellow ones, I have silver ones. It just depends what you have that day in your hand. So now we have a measurement from there up. We can try and get one from the tire to the bottom inside there. These inner ones are not always easy, but we might be able to get something. Just going from the top of the tire, it's 4 9/16 of an inch. Again, and then I'll write them all down in my notebook so that I have all these measurements in a second location before we get ready to start taking this truck apart. We're going to get the wheelbase. It's as simple as just rolling this out, locking it down, and then I like to cut like 10 inches off because it's an easy number to subtract. It makes it to where you're not trying to mess with the little metal end on there. Check. We are sitting at 121 3/4, which would be 111 3/4. So we'll get that written down and get the measurements on the other side just to make sure everything matches. All right, so we've got our measurements. I've moved the truck back. It's on the lift. And what I've got in my hand here is a scale. And I've got a set of 4, so there's one under each tire. We've got to hook the wires up to them. And then we can get a reading on the weight of the truck and what the corner weights are. Now, I'm going to set these under here, and we're just going to be lowering the truck down onto them. And yes, I know that is not the most accurate way of getting weights. The problems with it, for those of you who don't know, is ideally you want to be rolling your truck or car up onto the scales and back off of the scales to verify the weights. The problem with that is I don't have little ramps to build up to them. I could make some, but I don't have them. So what I end up doing is I set it up the way I'm doing, and then I just kind of try and jostle the suspension enough that everything kind of settles in. But yes, in the perfect world, we'd want to be rolling the truck onto it and rolling them back off so that the suspension is settled. The other thing we'd also want at that point is to have a driver in the seat of roughly the weight of or ideally the driver that's going to be driving the vehicle, and know exactly how much fuel we have so that every time we weigh it, we're weighing it with exactly the same amount of fuel. But this will give us an idea of what we do to the truck and what we're changing. I don't honestly expect we're going to be lightening the truck really. What I expect is that we are going to have some means of knowing what the corner weights are and how we can affect those. But for now, this will give us a baseline and something to work from. So let me get the actual computer hooked up and all the wires run, and then we'll get a weight and I'll show you guys what it looks like. Got plenty of daylight under the arms there, so I don't need to move them out of the way. Let's just bounce it around a little bit. Alright, we have a total of 3,778 pounds. It's like 1,138 on the driver's side front, 1,120 on the passenger side front, and then the rears are 775 on the driver's side and 774 on the passenger side. Looks to me like about 59.9% of the weight is on the front end, and then the balance being on the rear axle. So it's actually not too bad out of balance for a pickup where you think about the bed being really light. A lot of that has to do with getting that fuel tank back there and the mufflers back there, and all those little things are adding up. Now, I wish I had some sandbags we could put up there in the driver's seat, but I just don't have anything like that for weighting it down. And the things that I have that are heavy enough to offset for a driver are pretty cumbersome, bulky, and would risk damaging the interior, which we absolutely don't want to do. So anyway, this gives us some numbers. I'm going to get them written down. Hey guys, as you can see, I have moved quite a bit ahead of where we just left off with me weighing the vehicle and give you an idea of what we're going to be doing. This is all coming up in episode 2. Stay tuned for that. And again, I appreciate you watching. I hope you like this new project. We're going to try and use as many factory parts as we can. There is going to be some custom fabrication going on, but you know, trying to keep it for guys that want to try and do some of this in their driveway. So again, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, all the other YouTube stuff. We'll see you again real soon.